guys, and welcome back to the Crawl Room. We're here once again in this wonderful ranty room for all things Formula One. So the Las Vegas Grand Prix has come to a close this weekend, and what could be said for the inaugural race through the city streets of Las Vegas? Well, it started out as a bit of a farce and a bit of a joke, didn't it? With the FP1 session getting cancelled after just 8 minutes of running. Carlos Sainz, of course, being the unlucky victim of a manhole cover flying up and loosening itself, destroying his battery, his engine, and Christ knows whatever else, and subsequently had to take a penalty for it. So I really do feel for Carlos Sainz this weekend and Ferrari in that sense, especially after what happened in qualifying as well. It would have been a Ferrari front row lockout, but as it was, Sainz was heading towards the back of the grid there with a 10-place grid drop. And the race itself just provided some really good, close, entertaining racing. Does that mean I'm a fan of the track? Absolutely not. I still think it is a bit shit, to be honest with you. I think it's shit at the time they were running it. I think it's shit the way they treated the fans during that Friday session where they all made them get out before the FP2 session actually took place due to the delays with the manhole cover lifting up. And yeah, overall, it was a spectacle. But I'm not here for the spectacle, I'm here for the racing. And for the racing itself, it actually provided good racing. Does that mean it's a good track? I don't think it's a good track, but I do think overall it did add something this weekend. It was a good race, a really good race. So yeah, in 2 words to sum up Las Vegas Grand Prix, I would say surprisingly decent. So if you've never seen this series before, I award the drivers a maximum of 10 points based on their race weekend's performance, and I go all the way down to 0 if they have a particularly bad one. Take a look out for bonus points though. They're sometimes enough for some drivers to do something extra special during a race, and on the very rare occasion I do award minus points to those drivers to do something extra special, but for all the wrong reasons. Let's take a look at the current Crawl Room standings then going into this episode. It is on the screen now for you. Take a look and see where your favourite driver is, and can you see them going up? Can you see them going down based on what I am about to award them? It's going to change drastically, let me tell you. It is going to be flipped on its head, quite literally in some aspects as well. So take a look and see where those drivers are. And yes, all I've got to say is change is most definitely afoot. So, without further ado, let's kick things off with the race winner, of course. Who is it? Of course it is. It's Max Verstappen. Well, he didn't have it all his own way this weekend, did he? And this was certainly something that added to the drama and excitement of the weekend overall. It was very much advantage Ferrari going into qualifying. And yeah, they've locked out the front row. But as it was, of course, Carlos Sainz starting down in 12th as opposed to 2nd, meant that Max Verstappen had the inside line for turn 1. Now, the querying potential oil from historic F1 cars going around the track before the race took place there. Obviously, the cool temperatures not helping either. But basically, Max Verstappen stuffed it up the inside and then just pushed Leclerc wide as well as himself. They both washed completely wide there. Had it not been for the chaos behind and people going wide behind as well, struggling with the track conditions on the inside, I think both drivers would have lost out heavily there. So that they were both lucky in some aspects in that situation, because I don't think it was an intentional by Max. As much as we've seen him do it to Lewis Hamilton in the past, during the 2021 campaign especially, I don't honestly think that this time around it was an intentional move by Verstappen. Yeah, he absolutely wanted to get the inside, but I think he was genuinely surprised by the lack of grip. Then as it was, of course, he decided he was going to keep the lead. Red Bull were happy for him to keep the lead because they knew that all that was going to come their way was a 5-second time penalty, and they could have built the gap. So that is what happened. A 5-second time penalty was applied. David Croft was absolutely crying in the comms box going, "Oh, it's not fair, Martin, it's not fair. He should concede the position. It's not fair, he can go off into the distance. Oh, it's not fair, Martin, make him stop. Make him stop, Martin. Oh no, this is atrocious for everyone. It's the worst moment in Formula One history. Please let Charles back into the lead. Oh God." I thought, oh fucking hell, here we are. Fucking David Croft. But then he changed his tune, didn't he? He quickly changed his tune when Max Verstappen's tyres started to go off and Leclerc got back into the lead before the pit stops even came. So yeah, Max Verstappen electing to pit once Charles Leclerc got through and served that 5-second time penalty and tumbled down to around that 5th place area, didn't he? But then from there, carved his way through the field and did it very nicely and put some good overtaking opportunities in on his teammate and Charles Leclerc as well, of course, to mean that a race was had, an exciting race was had, but Max Verstappen still became the victor. So for Max Verstappen this weekend, despite the fact I thought he had a good race weekend overall, I'm going to score him a very harsh 7. A solid 7 for this weekend, mainly because of the fact he didn't get pole and because of the antics at turn 1, not conceding the position back. I do tend to agree with David Croft somewhat there, but he was moaning like a little bitch. What I will say is, of course, though, Max Verstappen this weekend has driven well, ultimately delivered the win, but he didn't have it all his own way, did he? And in that Red Bull car that has been so dominant this season, I did expect him to romp off into the distance by 20-odd seconds, but it didn't happen. So for that reason, it is just a solid 7 to Max Verstappen this weekend. Don't want to take anything away from his weekend overall. He did deserve the win in the end, but just a couple of little things just annoyed me there. The team radio, of course, send my regards to the stewards, of course, when he got the 5-second time penalty. I was like, oh, stop being an ass. Stop being an ass. But yeah, there you go. Solid 7 to Max Verstappen. Finishing in second place, we come to La la, oh sacre bleu, sha-la-la, oh sacre bleu. Provided some fantastic entertainment, as already mentioned there, with Max Verstappen dueling and dicing it out for the overall victory there. Got overtaken by Sergio Perez for the lead at one stage, and then re-overtook him for the lead again, and then it was the battle for second place. Leclerc went wide in the closing stages of the race. Sergio Perez slipped through, but Sergio Perez had a more higher downforce setup on the car to get himself around the corners, so that straight line speed was compromised, and Leclerc was chomping at the bit, wasn't it? And for the second time in a row, we saw Sergio Perez lose a position on the final lap of the race. Of course, Brazil last time out lost it to Alonso for the final podium spot. This time around, he lost out to Charles Leclerc for the second place position, and Charles Leclerc really deserved this, didn't he? He really did. It was so nice to see him bounce back so confidently after such a terrible run, I was going to say, at Brazil, but he never even made the start, did he? So yeah, it was nice to see him bounce back. It was crucial for Ferrari as well, of course, narrowing the gap to just 4 points in that constructors' battle for the second place position in those standings, worth millions and millions. Let's see how they get on at Abu Dhabi. But I think, even though Ferrari are behind by 4, I think going into Abu Dhabi, similar characteristics to Las Vegas, it will be very much advantage Ferrari that time around. So let's wait and see. But yeah, Charles Leclerc this weekend drove incredibly well. Just that mistake to let Sergio Perez through there. I do have to sort of, be a little bit harsh with him there, because it was an unfortunate and uncharacteristic error, and any other day of the week, had Sergio Perez not gone for a higher downforce setup, would have just sailed off into the distance at that point. So he has to count his lucky stars that he was able to get that position back. But for Charles Leclerc this weekend overall, it's going to be 9 points to him. 9 points on the Crawl Room Choose, sha-la-la, because he had a fantastic effort, a great race. I just have to dock him a point for that one minor mistake, because any other day of the week he wouldn't have got that position back. So yeah, a little bit lucky in that aspect, but yeah, nothing to take away from Charles this weekend. Drove sublime. 9 points to sha-la-la. Next up, it is Checo Sergio Perez, his first overall podium in about 14 months, it seems. Should have been a Red Bull 1-2, but wasn't in the end. But can we just say that Sergio Perez, having damage at the start and changing onto the tyres early, actually really benefited him, because he was able to leapfrog a lot of other cars while he was in that clean air. Having said that, he wasn't really in clean air, was he? Because he was battling with Sainz and Alonso, who also had to stop at the start as well. So yeah, he was able to catch up. The safety cars helped as well, of course, in that scenario. Everything was well timed for Perez this weekend to get himself up the order. But looking at the pace he had in the race, I think he could have maybe finished around here anyway, because the gap was quite a big gap then to P4. So yeah, it's difficult to say where Sergio Perez would have been after a poor qualifying once again. We're not surprised by him this season, but others did fall victim to it as well, which we'll come to in a moment. Yeah, overall, a solid weekend for Perez, but once again, another overtake on the last lap and losing a position was so unfortunate for him. And yeah, I can't really say anything other than he's disqualified anyway, but he was a solid effort. It would have been nice to see him secure the second place to give him a little bit more of a boost, because I think overall the race weekend did go well. And the race itself went well, but just that last lap will be brewing in the back of his mind and knocking his confidence a little bit, which is not what he needs. So overall, for Sergio Perez, disqualified anyway, but a solid enough effort. Securing P4, we come to Esti Ocon, Esti to you. Ain't like Esti Ocon. Absolutely fantastic effort by Esti this weekend. Yeah, again, a bit like Perez, you know, the safety cars fell into their hands quite nicely, was quite well timed during their pit stop phases to be able to get themselves some free positions, which is the luck of the draw, isn't it? It really is. And I'm sure David Croft would have said something stupid in the race that I didn't pick up on, like, oh, he's thrown the 2 dice, it's down on the floor, but they're all lucky 7s that have come out, and he's hit the jackpot like he's won the lottery, and he's got himself a speedboat or some shit like that. I'm sure David Croft would have said that at some point, like an absolute arse. But yeah, you know, everything just, the stars aligned, let's say that, for Esti this weekend. In the qualifying itself, it didn't though, did it? Out in Q1 with a 16th place start, elevated to 15th with Stroll's penalty. And yeah, as mentioned in the race, everything was just well timed for him. Made some good overtakes and some good moves as well, to be fair. Disobeyed team orders to stay behind his teammate Pierre Gasly, who has been playing team bitch all season long. So I knew when that radio call came in that Esti Ocon weren't going to be supporting that. He didn't, he got past him, as it didn't matter anyway. Gasly suffered at the end with battery issues, which we'll come to in a moment. But yeah, to see him finish P4 and a strong drive for it as well, you know, as mentioned, looked into it in certain aspects, but still put in some good overtakes in others as well. So fair play to Esti for that. Gone up in my estimations following the previous weekends where he's been a bit lonely and been awarded a Latifi or 2. So yeah, overall this weekend it's going to be 9.5 to Esti Ocon. I do feel that I've got to knock him half a point off for the poor qualifying, getting knocked out in Q1, but it's not too detrimental this weekend because, as mentioned with Perez, other drivers fell victim to it with the circuit ramping up and the temperatures being so low. So he recovered the race perfectly, so I can't really blame him for the qualifying, but I do just have to have a little bit of a nod to it. So yes, 9.5 to Esti. Finishing in 5th place, we come to Lance Stroll. Bloody hell. Bloody hell, not only is he finishing 5th, but he's ahead of his teammate as well. Wow, oh, wow. After starting the race in 19th, he qualified 14th, but had a 5-place grid drop for something that happened in, was it either qualifying or practice? I can't quite remember what happened there. Not sure if it was impeding or whether it was a penalty due to some mechanical components being changed. I'm not sure. I didn't really look into it because it's Lance Stroll and he just qualified on the crawl room anyway. But yeah, when I saw him up in 5th, I thought, oh, he's definitely got another pit stop to do. Oh, he's definitely got something. He's a bit like Oscar Piastri, you know. Oh, he's up there, but he's definitely going to tumble. Oh, no, he's actually done all his stops. Fucking hell! Fucking hell, what's happened here? Oh my God, I can't believe it. Has he had 2 good races in a row? Did he do well at Brazil? I can't remember. Did he do well at America as well? At Texas? Not Texas. Yeah, Texas. Oh God, I can't believe it. Is his season coming together at last? Who fucking knows? But yeah, Lance Stroll finishing P5. Again, the stars aligned for him, just like Esteban Ocon. Did a great job, and there we go. So he's disqualified anyway, but once again, I am shooketh that he has finished so high up the order. Oh dear. That's all I can say to that. Can't believe it. Cannot believe it. In 6th place, we come to Carlos Sainz. Smooth operator. Smoothish. As smooth as you can get running over a manhole cover, can't you? For fuck's sake. I mean, how unlucky is that? It really just undid his entire weekend, didn't it, from that point on, really? Such a shame. If Ferrari had had 2 cars up at the front there, they could have really been putting Red Bull under pressure with the strategies, with the tyre choice and everything. I mean, most likely Ferrari wouldn't have done it. They'd just stuck Carlos Sainz on wets just for shits and giggles. We know what Ferrari are like. Or he'd had a 40-second pit stop. But they weren't even in that opportunity to do that, were they? They didn't have the 2 cars to battle against that one Red Bull at the start of the race to have a different tyre compound or different strategy, which was unfortunate for them, and it wasn't any fault of their own for a change. But once again, the Ferrari look just pops up Carlos Sainz, and it's like, yeah, you're not having any today, pal. At the start, he got it wrong going into the first corner, tagged and spun, didn't he? Tagged Lewis Hamilton and spun round, half a pirouette. got going again and made the early pit stop, which was advantageous for these drivers initially. But then the second phase, the second safety car came out, and I don't think it quite worked out at that point then, did it, for him? And he was sort of languishing down in 10th for quite a while after that second pit stop, which was unfortunate after he'd made all the effort in the first round of stops and up to the first safety car. Yeah, it was just one of those where it just didn't go quite well for Carlos Sainz this weekend, but I don't want to blame him too much for what happened because it all came undone in that practice session. So I have awarded him a solid 7 for Carlos Sainz. People are going to say that's generous at some aspects, but at the end of the day, he was ruined by things that were out of his hand. He was half a tenth away from his teammate to get that pole position. It'd have been a Ferrari front row lockout. The race would have panned out so much differently with Max Verstappen in third. It could have been a double Ferrari podium with the pace they had this weekend, but the way it worked for Carlos Sainz this weekend, I just feel sorry for him. So, a solid 7 to Carlos Sainz. Finishing in 7th place, we come to Lewis Hamilton.
Aw, shucks. I wish I got to race at Vegas. I wanted to be the first person ever to crash into the Eiffel Tower and Caesar's Palace in the same night.
And there we have it, Latifi of the week to Lewis Hamilton, and with it comes a final warning because that is 3 Latifis he has had this season now. People are going to say that's really harsh, and in some aspects I do agree, but let's face the facts. He had a poor qualifying there, down in 11th place, out in Q2. As mentioned already, other drivers fell victim to it. But that Mercedes car looked decent, and I think it should have got into Q3 regardless. But the lap time just wasn't there, unfortunately. I'm not sure if it was a result of Mercedes getting the track timings wrong to get a lap in, or whether Hamilton made a mistake. The end of Q2, it looked like the temperatures were cooling too much, and they weren't improving on the laps. So, yeah, an error maybe in the first part of the Quali 2 session really put pay to his lap times, but yeah, nonetheless, P11 on the grid, elevated to P10 with Carlos Sainz's penalty. Got tagged by Carlos Sainz at the start of the race and ran wide. That wasn't his fault at all. But then overtaking Oscar Piastri, made a slight bit of contact with him, which gave Oscar Piastri a front puncture and gave Lewis Hamilton a rear right puncture, which he didn't detect and had to do an entire lap with a flat tyre. So to finish 7th has to be commended, but if he'd just bided his time a little bit more and just waited for a straight and been a little bit more patient there, he could have been up there in the podium places. He could have been doing something a lot special. So, yeah, a harsh Latifi of the week, I feel, for Lewis Hamilton. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying he fully deserved it, but there were aspects of that race which were just frustrating to watch because it could have been so much more for Mercedes, and especially now when Ferrari have scored big points against them and have lowered that gap to 4 points now. The Mercedes car had the pace, but the drivers just didn't get it over the line in the correct positions, really, did they? So, yeah, unfortunate for Lewis Hamilton, and I am sorry to award him a Latifi, but this is the cruel room, and I've looked at it and I've gone, yeah, I've given Latifis for less this season, and yeah, a poor qualifying culminated into what was going to be a good recovery drive, but then contact with Oscar Piastri, which was a racing incident, don't get me wrong, but if Hamilton had just been a little bit more patient, he could have got past on the next straight, used the DRS, and would have been away and clear. So, yeah, maybe a little bit of frustration setting in at that point for Lewis, but there you go. So, the Latifi of the week to Lewis Hamilton, and with it a final warning, but I can't see me disqualifying him in the last round. He's got to do something drastically wrong at Abu Dhabi for me to throw him out before the end. So hopefully he can have a good end to the season at Abu Dhabi. The championship's so close anyway for the Cruel Room standings that he's still in it. He's still got a chance, so fingers crossed for a good race and a good finishing position on the Cruel Room. But for now, Latifi of the week and a final warning. Then we come to George of the Russell. Watch out for that time penalty. There he is. Was it a harsh 5-second time penalty? Yes, somewhat, I would say. But at the same time, everyone else that did a lunge up the inside of that corner managed to see the car that was doing the lunge and get out of the way. Whereas Max Verstappen stuffed it up the inside and was rightly so cleanly alongside at that point as well. You know, it was Max's corner. As much as people love to hate Max Verstappen for what he did, it wasn't reminiscent of like Brazil last year on Hamilton or anything like that. It was very much a move that was on. a move that other drivers had made in the race, a move that Max Verstappen had made earlier in the race as well. And yeah, George just didn't see him. He clearly didn't see that he was going to go for the lunge, so just turned in. So yeah, in some aspects it was harsh because the damage was done for George and had to make a pit stop. But at the same time, yeah, he did deserve it. Any other day he just turned in and it could have been a lot of damage to both cars. Both cars could have been out and in the wall. So yeah, it was luck rather than judgment that both cars actually continued to race. So yeah, George Russell once again making a silly error there, and that 5-second time penalty was heavily, heavily costly because he did cross the line in P4, didn't he? But that 5 seconds drops him down here to P8 and behind his teammate. And again, a bit like Lewis Hamilton. You know, Mercedes, at the end of the day, the drivers didn't get the finishing positions that they should have got. George Russell recovered to 4th with damage. So where could Hamilton have been, you know? But George had that 5-second time penalty, and yeah, I'll admit, probably a harsh 5-second time penalty in some aspects because he did sustain the most damage and was affected most by it. But at the end of the day, you can't just blindly turn into a corner, you know. Everyone else that made a move there, I mean, even Charles Leclerc made a move there on Perez for the final podium position. Perez saw him, and that was for the final lap, dicing it out for P2, you know. We saw other overtakes there as well. So, yeah, the only time it went wrong was when George turned in on Max. So, disqualified anyway in the cruel room for George, and once again just compounding what has been a miserable season for him with, yeah, a what could have been yet again. And then we come to Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin.
Come on, Red Bull, give me a call. I can do no better than Perez, but I certainly can't do any worse.
And there we have it, a Latifi of the week to Fernando Alonso as well. Can you believe it? Drivers falling by the wayside, aren't they just? And of course, with it, that's his 3rd Latifi of the week, so joins Lewis Hamilton in that final warning pile. Needs to really book his ideas up, but as mentioned with Lewis Hamilton, I can't see him doing anything drastically wrong at Abu Dhabi for me to be able to disqualify him. So it's just cost them in the potential Cruel Room Championship, really. But as mentioned, it's so close that anything can happen. As Ellie Goulding once sang, anything can happen. Do, 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 do. Where the fuck that come from? Anyway, yeah, so, you know, Fernando Alonso this weekend, his weekend was going okay up until turn 1 where he got it wrong, was lunging himself up the inside, fell victim to the cool temperatures and the little bit of oil that has been noted being down at turn 1. But the difference between Max and Alonso doing it is Alonso spun himself round and took Valtteri Bottas out as well. And you know I don't take kindly to other people affecting other people's race. And of course Bottas had to pit for damage. He got arse-ended as a result as well. So Bottas was heavily compromised. Fernando Alonso had to pit for a wing and initially looked like it was going to work out for him. But in the end, you know, this gaggle of Perez, Sainz and Fernando Alonso that were all there that pitted in the first lap at the opening stages as a result of the contact that happened at the start of the race. Look at where Sergio Perez is and look at where Fernando Alonso is. So yeah, some of that would have been down to strategy and the timing of the second safety car period. But nonetheless, you know, I can't really say that Alonso had an astonishing race because, yeah, he recovers to score a couple of points, which is fair enough. He takes another car out of the race, which was unfortunate, but it happened, and I have to penalise that. And his teammate, which is Lance Stroll, finished ahead of him. And that's just the final nail in the coffin, really, isn't it? So, yeah, Fernando Alonso, a 3rd Latifi of the week this season. Hard to believe with the season he's had that he's had 3 of them, but it's just the way it is, I'm afraid. And, yeah, a final warning to him, but as mentioned, I don't think he's going to get disqualified and really needs to book his ideas up now in that final stage of the race. Let's end the season on a high at Abu Dhabi, shall we? But for now, it is a Latifi of the week to Fernando Alonso. Then we come to the last point scorer on this list, of course, and it is Oscar Piastri. What's your favourite Piastri. Well, I'm afraid to say that Oscar's race weekend really was just curtailed somewhat, wasn't it? McLaren had a poor strategy with his car. They were hoping basically for yet another safety car to get himself a cheeky free pit stop at the end after starting on the hard tyres and then pitting for the hard tyres again and then pitting for the hard tyres again. It meant effectively that he had no choice but to come into the pits yet again to put a different compound on. And he was up there in 4th place as well, wasn't he? So he did have a good run and was going to look to, you know, benefit from everything that happened, but as it was, McLaren got the strategy wrong. The McLaren didn't look to have the overall pace this weekend either, so the fact that he was in 4th was somewhat, you know, a bit of a bit of a red herring, so to speak. There was a difference, you know, if it had pitted for a different compound earlier in the race, he'd have probably been around that 7th, 8th area. But as it was, he came out the pits in 11th, got past Gasly and secured fastest lap points as well. So he does take 2 points for his efforts. But it could have been so much more for him. I think he could have been up there in P6, P7, definitely, had McLaren not screwed him over. So for Oscar Piastri, I'm awarding him a solid 6.5 this week, and I'm not going to say it was his finest hour. We've seen a lot better from him this season, but at the same time, McLaren have offered him a lot better as well in terms of car and also in terms of strategy. So one of those things, unfortunately, but yeah, some drivers have had some better races this weekend than himself. And I do feel sorry for him, but it's a good score nonetheless, especially when I'm awarding Latifi's, aren't I? So, yeah, you know, he doesn't get a Latifi, far from it, but it is just 6.5 to Oscar Piastri. Then we come to the drivers that unfortunately didn't secure any points, and the car finishing in 11th place, it is Pierre Gasly. What a shame for Pierre, what a shame. He'd driven so well, what a great qualifying effort he had as well, and then in the closing stages of the race had a battery issue and basically just didn't have any hybrid power. He didn't have the extra electrical power. It was just running on raw engine power, which this day and age in Formula 1 is not enough, and he dropped like a stone. After Oscar Piastri pitted, I thought, oh, maybe, just maybe he can hold on to that final point, because Oscar was like 10 seconds behind him, but as it was, he was gaining on him like 3 seconds a lap, and that really just put pay to any of his chances. So a big shame for Pierre this weekend. It was a weekend of what could have been. As mentioned, he was ahead of his teammate. Ocon was told to stay behind him, but Ocon disobeyed then shortly after Gasly had the issues anyway. So Ocon was probably right to disobey the team orders, even though at the time we didn't really know that Gasly was going to have those issues. So a huge shame for Gasly. You know, it's a huge shame for him to come out of this weekend pointless after such a strong qualifying and to not get any points due to no fault of his own either. You know, the car once again letting him down. The reliability of the Alpine this season has been very on and off, hasn't it? Very hit and miss. And at least he was able to finish the race, but it wasn't inside the points, which is a huge shame. Alpine aren't really fighting for anything in terms of the constructors. They are just P6 and have been P6 for quite some time. There was no way P7 were going to catch them. There was no way they were going to catch P5 for quite a number of races. But nonetheless, it would have been nice to see Gasly up there, because he could have been 4th and 5th this weekend for Alpine. That's where they were. And it should have been more, but it wasn't due to no fault of his own. So for Pierre Gasly, it's going to be 8 points this weekend to him. Don't want to take anything away from his weekend. A solid qualifying, a great race, and was clearly having the pace in the early stages and the mid stages of that race to be inside the top 5. But then the car let him down. What a shame, but still glad he made the finish and deserved a lot more from it. 8 points to Pierre Gasly. Finishing in 12th place, we come to Alex Albon in the Williams, and oh no, what could have been? What could have been for the Williams squad, not just for Albon, but for Logan Sargeant as well, of course, who we'll come to in a minute. But what a shame. You know, lining up 5th and 6th on the grid after the penalties, I think it was. Initially had a great start to the race overall and a great phase. Then as they made their pit stops, the drivers that had made the pit stops early, of course, like the likes of Perez, Sainz, Alonso, jumped them, which is understandable based on the strategy at that situation. The timing of the safety car was unfortunate because they'd pitted under the safety car, and then that meant they lost a few more places to cars that had already pitted as well. It was just going a bit bad to worse, wasn't it, for him? And then in the final stages of the race, the second safety car phase, I don't believe they elected to pit any of the Williams cars. Albon was hanging on to 9th, I believe, wasn't it? And then dropped to 10th, and then just with a with one corner, locked up, went wide, lost the positions and tumbled like a stone. Finishing here in P12 and miles behind Pierre Gasly as well in the end. I think it was like 15 seconds, wasn't it? So, yeah, nowhere near the points in the end. Partly due to strategy, but partly, unfortunately, due to just... I don't think the drivers got the maximum out of the car that they could this weekend. I think points were possible in that Williams, even with that strategy, I'm afraid to say. So for Alex Albon, it's going to be just 3 points this weekend to him. Again, got to be cruel to be kind on this series. I've not been cruel enough at times. Yeah. I think even with the compromise strategy that Williams put Alex on, he's been known for the master of defence this season, and that wasn't his finest hour, was it, making that mistake? So, yeah, you know, would he have held on? I think he could have done with the straight line speed. Would he have got points? I think he could have got 10th. I think there was a point possible there, even with the compromise strategy. So for him to finish 12th is unfortunate, especially when it looked like it was going to be massive advantage to Williams going into that Sunday race. You know, both cars up there, AlphaTauri miles behind as well. You'd have thought, well, it's not gone well for you with the strategy and the timing of the safety cars, but at least pick up a couple of points just to try and extend the gap for P7 in the Constructors, and neither driver managed to do that. So a huge shame and a huge disappointment to Williams. For Alex Albon, as mentioned, 3 points to him, and unfortunately that's all I can give him. A great qualifying, but the points are on Sunday, and it just didn't come together, did it? Finishing in an unlucky 13th place, it is, of course, Kevin Magnussen in the Haas. After a strong qualifying, didn't do anything in the race, really. Haas just tumbled out like a stone, as per usual, but was quicker than his teammate overall all weekend, Nico Hulkenberg, electing to go for the old spec Haas, whilst K-Mag went for the new spec Haas. So, yeah, Kevin Magnussen clearly a bit more comfortable in the new spec Haas, and finishing 13th is really all that can be expected of him. He's disqualified on the cruel room anyway after his antics have been poorly performing throughout the season against his teammate. Even though the car's not fantastic, that's one person you need to beat. And this weekend he did do it, but it was too little too late for him. He's already been chucked out of the series and the standings. But yes, nonetheless, unlucky for some P13, but probably the best that K-Mag were going to get. So there you have it. K-Mag, disqualified anyway, but a Q3 appearance, finishing in probably the best place Haas was going to finish. It was okay. Finishing in 14th, it is Daniel Ricciardo in the AlphaTauri. Yeah, this weekend has been a shocker for AlphaTauri, isn't it? We've seen the upgrades coming in for that AlphaTauri. They've been up there chomping at the bit. They've been securing top 8 finishes in sprint races. They've been inside the top 10 in the main races themselves in so many rounds this season, and have elevated themselves just within the last few rounds from 10th and last in the standings all the way up to 8th, and only 7 points behind Williams. And it looked like Williams were going to be under threat this weekend. As it turned out, though, AlphaTauri were nowhere, were they? Struggled to get out of Q1 at best, you know. Ricciardo finishing last of the runners in Q2, so only just made himself into Q2 there. He only just got through. And just the pace was lacking all weekend. Didn't see anything of him in that special livery, which I love, for by the way. The special liveries this weekend have been nice, I would say that. My favourite, I think, would definitely have to be the Red Bull, because they went down the purple side pods, which reminded me of the 2013 Red Bull, with the Infinity logo down the side, the Infinity sponsorship. That's my favourite ever Red Bull. So the fact that they harked back to that was very nice to see, and I did like that livery. Williams had one as well, didn't they? Ferrari, of course. I'm going on a tangent here, but yeah, Daniel Ricciardo with his special livery. That livery clearly didn't add any speed to him. In fact, it made him slower. So Daniel Ricciardo this weekend, didn't see anything of him. It's 4 points. 4 points to Daniel Ricciardo. I'm sure that was probably the best he could do, but at the end of the day, a lot of other drivers had a lot of a better race. And even with like the timings of the safety cars and the virtual safety car and just general strategy overall, you'd have thought at some point an AlphaTauri would have got up there into the points just by chance or by luck. But as it was, they were that slow. There was nothing they could do. So yeah, 4 points to Daniel Ricciardo. Then we come to the first of the Alfa Romeos, which is Zhou Guanyu, and not really much to say about his weekend anyway. Disqualified on the cruel room anyway, was knocked out in Q1 and stayed at the back all weekend. Didn't see hardly anything of him apart from Max Verstappen overtaking him, as they were on two completely different strategies, and that was about as much telly time as Zhou Guanyu got this weekend. So that's as much as he's getting on the cruel room. Disqualified anyway, once again a poor performance, nowhere near the points, nowhere near the pace. And yeah, there were signs with the Bottas that car could have maybe done a little bit more, couldn't there? So yeah, Zhou Guanyu disqualified anyway. Another poor weekend by him. Then we come to Logan Sargeant in the second of the Williams after such a great qualifying performance, as mentioned, just like Alex Albon. It all slipped away from him. He was struggling early on with the tyres though, wasn't he? You know, Albon was able to manage him for a bit longer, but Logan Sargeant just dropped like a stone, didn't he? He got off the line once, and then one car got past, and then that was it. Then it was like he was still wheel spinning down the straight. His tyres just went off immediately, and that was that. He was out, and here he is finishing in 16th place. He only finishes ahead of one car as well in the race itself. So, yeah, Logan Sargeant disqualified on the cruel room anyway. A weekend of what could have been. Judging by that strategy, I think points were possible for Williams. As mentioned, I do think they were possible. I think 9th and 10th could have been there for him. But the drivers didn't get the maximum out of the tyre life, and Logan struggled a lot more than what Alex did with it. So yeah, here he is, 16th place. It was like he never even got into Q3, isn't it? So there we have it for Logan Sargeant. Such a strong Saturday, but such a poor Sunday. 16th place, disqualified anyway. And that's that. Then we come to the last of the runners, which is Valtteri Bottas in 17th place. Now, this weekend, it could have been a weekend of what could have been, but at the same time, I'm sure Alfa Romeo would have dropped down the order anyway. The Williams did, the Haas did. Alfa Romeo, I'm sure, had they not been taken out at the start with Bottas, would have ended up tumbling outside the points anyway. But it would have been nice to see him have a fair fight, wasn't it? But unfortunately, his race came undone instantly, didn't it, when he got tagged and spun around by Fernando Alonso, or Fernando Alonso hit him and Alonso spun in front of him, didn't he, and then he collected him there. Front wing damage on Bottas's car, but then to compound that, Oscar Piastri ran into the arse end of him. I think it was Oscar Piastri, was it? Yeah. Arse-ended Bottas as well during that concertina effect, and yeah, unfortunately suffered rear floor damage and couldn't really recover from that and trundled round in last place, just hoping for a miracle. So as much as Bottas has under-delivered this season, and as much as I was fully expecting him to tumble down the order, as we saw with the Haas and the Williams as mentioned, he didn't have the opportunity to do so, did he? He was dropped to the back at the start of the race and had floor damage. I sometimes don't excuse those behaviours, and sometimes I have been making excuses for Bottas in the past, where he's just had no pace at all, and then Alfa Romeo go, oh, we picked up some damage by picking up a bit of debris on that one. You think, load of bollocks. But this time, it was legit, it was genuine, and I felt sorry for Bottas, because, you know, a strong qualifying, all fell away, and it wasn't his fault. So yeah, disqualified anyway. Shame for Bottas, though. Then we come to the list of retirements, of course. So the first on this list, the last to retire in the race, it is Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri. He's getting the same as Daniel Ricciardo. It's 4 points. That car was awful this weekend, wasn't it? And then he was struggling with gear selection towards the end of the race and retired with about 5 laps to go of the race. Pulled it off nicely, actually joined Nico Hulkenberg in the same escape road, didn't he? So, yeah, you know, at least they could have a chat at the end of the race, couldn't they? Go, how shit's your season gone? Well, mine's shit. Well, not as shit as mine, I tell you. So, yeah, unfortunate, you know, just a general lack of pace overall by AlphaTauri this weekend. Yes, he was out-qualified by Daniel Ricciardo, but it didn't matter in the end because they weren't running around anywhere close to the points. And, yeah, just all went undone and all went wrong for him. So, Yuki Tsunoda, 4 points to him. As mentioned, joining Yuki Tsunoda in that escape road, or Yuki Tsunoda joining Nico Hulkenberg in the escape road, it is, of course, Nico Hulkenberg. Yes, what could be said for Haas's weekend this weekend? Looked like it could be promising, but we knew in the race they were going to tumble down the order anyway. As mentioned there briefly with Kevin Magnussen, Kevin Magnussen's got the new spec car, Nico Hulkenberg's got the old spec car. Although Hulkenberg feels like the new spec could be faster over a single lap, in a race pace it won't chew its tyres up as aggressively, so they seem to have gone backwards with tyre life with the upgrade. So that's an interesting point to make there. Nico Hulkenberg's weekend, though, he was outpaced by Kevin Magnussen throughout the weekend, it must be said. Out-qualified, was being outraced with him, and then retired anyway due to an electrical issue, I believe, in the end with that Haas car. So, heavily unfortunate, but got it down the escape road and didn't cause any more dramas. Nico Hulkenberg, it's going to be 3.5 to him. Not an impressive weekend by his standards. As mentioned, we know that Haas is going to be at the back anyway and one of the slowest cars on the grid. But you have to beat your teammate, and he didn't do so. So that's that, I'm afraid, for Nico Hulkenberg. Just a lonely score of 3.5 to him. And then last, but by no means least, we come to Lando Norris.
Hey, guy, come join me in the disqualified pile. Don't worry, the goat doesn't bite. Well, not unless you want me to. Growl.
This disqualification was brought to you by KDF1, currently running under Imitation Jeff on YouTube. Now, Kieran slid into my DMs over the weekend, of course, after the race on Sunday, and asked me if I had disqualified Lando Norris, to which my reply was genuine and honest, saying, I've not yet done the scores, Kieran, but yeah, I've not sent the scores off to Dan yet, but I can't reveal any secrets, of course. I don't want any spoilers to get out there as to what I've awarded drivers, so I wouldn't tell you even if I didn't. To which point he then replied, well, you definitely disqualified him then, haven't you? So I sent the scores off to Dan, and I didn't disqualify Lando because I didn't feel like he was a driver that deserved to be in that disqualification pile. Despite the fact he had already received 3 Latifis this season, one of which I would admit was potentially harsh, I felt that he didn't deserve to be in that pile. You know, he's had a good recovery with McLaren this season, and overall I thought, you know, he's done a good job. So I didn't initially disqualify him, but then Kieran just, you know, kept putting the hint there that, oh, you've definitely disqualified him. Oh, you must have disqualified him. There's no way you haven't disqualified him. You've got to have disqualified him. Can you just tell me if you've disqualified him? I need to know. Is he disqualified? To which I then replied, well, I hadn't, but because she kept telling me that I basically had to, I now have. So everyone that is a McLaren fan, everyone that is a Lando Norris fan, you have Kieran, KDF1, currently running under Imitation Jeff on this on YouTube. You have him to thank for this disqualification for Lando Norris, because he just kept, you know, dropping me the hint, so to speak. He was, of course, awarded a Latifi the week in Mexico, was it, where Lando didn't get any lap times together and didn't do very well. That, again, was all thanks down to Kieran, of course, because he said that's definitely a Latifi for Lando, and he didn't realise it would then meant he was on a final warning. So, yeah, he's had a lot of influence in this Crawl Room Championship this season, and to say Kieran calls himself a Formula 1 fan, and a McLaren fan, and a Lando fan, he's really put the nail in the coffin for Lando's chances this season. So unfortunately, he was going to get 2 points for my standings overall. Dan can vouch for me and back that up in the comments section, I'm sure, Dan, that I did initially send over the scores that said Lando Norris 2 points, and I was going to say during the video I am letting him off because I don't think he deserves to be in this qualification pile. But Kieran Davison went on about it and kept saying I've definitely disqualified him, so I thought, well, I best make good. If he thinks I've disqualified him, then I have. So here you are, Kieran. Everything you wished and hoped for has occurred. Lando Norris is disqualified from the Crawl Room after making a mistake in the race, sending him off into the wall. I'm glad he's okay. Had to be sent to the medical centre and then from there off to hospital for further checks, but good to see that he was all okay and was back in the paddock by the end of the race. I think he just made it after the end of the race, didn't he, in the end? But yeah, a poor qualifying overall out in Q1, but as mentioned, the McLaren just didn't seem to have the pace. The race itself, though, looked like it was going to come good to them. Both cars made good progress. On that safety car restart, cold tyres, and just dropped it. Spun round, went into the wall backwards and sideways, then the car pirouetted back round and then nosedived it into the wall down the escape road. So yeah, he made some distance, did Lando, and unfortunately, you know, it was just a bad weekend overall. So I was going to let him off, but I can't. So yeah, Lando Norris has been disqualified on the Crawl Room. Can you believe it? Who was looking like a championship protagonist just at the start of this video. He was in second place. He's now out of there. He's gone. He's gonzoed. And you've all got Imitation Jeff, KDF1, Kieran, to thank for it. So there we have everything, guys. Those were the runners and riders of the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Let me know down below if I've scored any drivers too high, any too low. The updated standings with the scores I have just awarded are on the screen now for you to take a look at. And can you believe it? Back at the top, it is Max Verstappen, despite getting minus 20 points in Singapore. How mad is that? He didn't really get a good score here either, did he? But the other drivers that were around him got low scores, all Latifis. So, yeah, quite a good margin to Max Verstappen, it must be said, with only one round to go. But look who's suddenly jumped up into second and third after being nowhere near all season long. It's the two Ferraris. Shalala and Carlos Sainz are there in the second and third positions. Drivers that were formerly up there and have always been up there since the start of the season have tumbled down the order as well. The Latifis are playing their part. They really, really are. And, yeah, Max Verstappen have absolutely walked away with his championship, wouldn't he now? You'd think if there's an extra 20 points on top of that, and that would have been if I had still scored him 0 at Singapore. So just think of that. That's crazy. I scored him no points at all at Singapore. It has still been 20 points ahead now, but that minus 20... you know, hampered him to start with, but he's back up at the top. I mean, everything's still to play for at Abu Dhabi, don't get me wrong, but it looks like we may have found our winner. But for everyone else, it is really, really up in the air, isn't it? Still all to play for, still really close, still really tight. A couple of drivers going into that final round on a final warning as well. Unbelievable stuff. A massive thanks, as always, goes out to Dan Bartlett, formerly of Mushy Gaming, for providing me with the scoreboard that you see on your screen now, for the intros, for the outros, and for the driver icons as I talk about each driver, and also for pointing up with my shitter changing the scores because Mr. Kieran wanted Lando disqualified, so he duly obliged. Yeah, massive thanks, as always, goes out to him. Without him, this series would be more pointless than it already is. Who can forget Dave, F1 Games PlayStation, for providing me with the Latifi of the Week skits. Hard to believe we're almost at the end of the season, but thanks so much for your efforts, Dave. And to Dominic Orlando, whose job is done. Thank you very much to you, buddy, for providing me with the Latifi of the Week skits. I've got enough in the bank and in reserves now that I can disqualify on Latifi up to 8 drivers in Abu Dhabi if I really feel like it. So, yeah, I've got plenty in reserve. Thanks as always go out to Dom. He's a great guy, and thanks so much for doing this season. I know he's a busy guy, and he's in Canada as well, of course, where they've got potato internet, so it takes him a long time to send them over to me, bless him. But he does his best. He does his best. But massive thanks as always to him. And, yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks to all three. Without them, this series would be shite. It wouldn't be possible. So, yeah, thanks as always. So I will see you all next Tuesday, 6 PM for the finale. The finale. The Abu Dhabi Grand Prix will have finished. We will crown a Cruel Room champion next episode. Don't miss it. There's still a lot to play for. I know it's advantage Max Verstappen going into this final round, but as you've seen in the Cruel Room before, anything can happen, and it usually does. So, yeah, anyone can win it. Don't worry. It could all still happen. It could all kick off. It's always down to the drivers. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and as always, much